Hi, welcome to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast. My name is Elisa Minkin. I'm a pediatrician, and I'm super excited to be here today with Anna Sherman. Hi, Anna.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Anna Sherman is a registered psychotherapist, maternal mental health practitioner, and clinical supervisor in Toronto. I cannot complain about the snow today when I'm talking to someone from Toronto.
Yeah, seriously.
She works with individuals, couples, and families, as well as supervises qualifying therapists in their training. She helps her clients to heal and overcome trauma, fears, and emotional blocks in their lives and relationships by building skills and tools to help them themselves. Anna loves working with new mamas and helping women to live empowered, authentic, and intentional lives. Anna holds a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and is specially trained in cognitive behavior therapy, also called CBT, emotionally focused therapy, EFT, the Gottman method, maternal mental health, family systems theory, mindfulness meditation, and psychodynamic therapy. So I'm really excited to do this with you. Thank you so much. We are,
Pleasure to be here.
thank you. We're going to talk today about the Shidduch system. I'm not going to use any negative terms. I'm not going to use the C word. Um, I'm not going to say it. But
Good.
let's start with just talking about why is it's difficult for both the women and the men, and I'm not going to say boys and girls here. I hate when they do that. It's difficult for both, but I think it's especially challenging for our young women. And could you maybe elaborate on that, please?
Sure, absolutely. So, yes, I definitely think in recent years, I'd say in the last decade, there's definitely
Hmm.
been a lot of changes that have gone on in the Shidduch system. There's been a bit of an upheaval and kind of like, for lack of a better term, a mass hysteria when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to young women entering the Shidduch system. We
Yes.
won't say the unspeakable. Mainly because there seems to be this idea that there are a lot more girls than women than men. Um, and even when the numbers aren't even like that so far apart, then the idea is that there's a lot more like eligible young women than men. And just where are you going to find your daughter a shidduch? And so then what I find starts happening is the stress and the worry and the pressure starts being placed at a young age, like even as young as high school. It starts being talked about and thought about and worried about. And then, yeah, very often by the time these young women come back from their gap year, like in seminary, then there's already like this mass hysteria of like, what do we do? And yeah,
Right. I think there's an
that's where a lot of
expectation.
that's where
Right.
a lot of the complication starts.
Right. I think there's an expectation for a lot that they'll start shidduchim then precisely because of this hysteria, that if they don't start soon enough,
Yes,
then it will be
yes,
too late.
yes. It will. Yes, this idea that it will be too late, and I personally don't. I mean, listen, my daughters are only 8, so I
Mhm.
mean, it's not like I'm
Oh
speaking
my
from experience.
gosh. You should
But
be
I
working on this.
personally, yeah, but
Just
I
kidding.
personally just out of experience from seeing enough clients, young women in this age group and stage of life, and also just from my years, making shidduchim, I personally don't think that that stage is it's the right time for every young woman, and some young women come back from Israel and they're not ready, or they come back from seminary and they're just not ready to get married. They're not ready to like take on all the responsibilities of being in a relationship, being responsible for somebody else, being a mother, having their own home, and navigating career and parnassa and yeah, communication and everything. And yet that part, I don't feel like it gets a lot of attention. I feel like it's just like, well, let's get them married off, and they'll grow up together and they'll learn. And you know, sometimes that's good, and sometimes that works, and sometimes it's not the healthiest route to go for everybody.
And I think that we're seeing a parallel rise in divorce, early divorce of young people. I mean, correct me if I'm
Absolutely.
wrong. And I'm wondering how related that is to some hysteria that one must get married right away.
Absolutely. And
Ready or
I'm
not, here
seeing
you go.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm
Mhm.
seeing a lot of that in my practice and in the community. And what I find a lot of the root cause seems to be is just, yeah, exactly what you're saying. A lot of focus and pressure on getting to that, reaching that goal of being a married person, you know, finding a spouse at a young age, not missing the boat, not being the one left behind. That's like a big thing.
Mhm.
And then because single life is just like, you know, nobody wants to be living the single life. It's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. That seems to be like the attitude. And then very little attention put on what is required for a married life. Like what happens after all the hysteria calms down is like, what, you know, what is attraction? What is communication? What is the difference between men and women and how they communicate? You know, what is this big commitment of being a married person? Am I going to have to move away and be away from my family? Am I going to become a parent at 20, 21? Like maybe, but what does that even mean to be responsible for this young life? And yeah, I think a lot of young people are just not prepared, don't even know what's hit them, and don't even know what, you know, what attraction really means, or what that is, what it's supposed to feel like. And yeah, and then I'm sort of seeing the aftermath, you know, of these young couples that are just sort of like, it's either not working because they were ill prepared for marriage, or it's not working because they weren't educated in what really to look for,
So how,
and they're not
mhm.
well matched.
Right. So how would you differentiate between those that are ready and those that are not? I mean, I think part of it will just be maturity, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody's matures at the same age, so some will be ready after, seminary, sometimes even earlier. Some do
Yeah.
are ready early and they're really ready. Um,
Hmm.
so some of it's maturity, right?
Hmm.
What other factors would you think are important for actual readiness?
So responsibility,
Hmm.
like, I mean, you can be very mature but not be ready for that kind of responsibility. You know, you can
Hmm.
be very mature, but but really just want to bury your head in 5 years of university and come out with, you know, an honors degree. You know, but that doesn't mean you're ready for the responsibility of a home.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, maturity and responsibility. Responsibility is a big one because being married and having your own home is a lot. I mean, you know, working a job and or school and marriage aside, like even just having a home, just making sure there's food in the fridge, making sure that you can juggle having a relationship with your spouse and making meals, and you know, making sure the house is in order, washing your own clothes and ironing, and yeah, just not everybody's ready for that at such a young age. And then um, for a lot of, you know, couples in the Orthodox community, it is expected that they're going to have a child right away, and then that's a whole other
Right.
realm of responsibility, being a parent at such a young age, that it, you know, it can be a big sacrifice. It's a big commitment.
Right. I think that's a
And
separate podcast even because I
yeah,
think you could be ready for marriage, but not for children. And that would be a whole separate conversation. But that leads me to another aspect, which is the young woman's mental health,
yeah,
right? Because you could be responsible and you could be mature, and yet you could be struggling with issues that are not resolved.
yeah, yes, yes,
So, as a therapist, I'd like to hear your take.
yeah. So I think that, you know, up until a certain age, I think pretty much all young people are still, you know, always going through a process of finding themselves and figuring out who they are. And throughout high school, there's all kinds of different roadblocks that can get in the way of that, whether it's, fitting in, to a certain crowd, or, being a real school person or not being a real school person, possibly being bullied, or feeling pressured, peer pressure to be like everybody else. And then, you graduate, and then the question is, well, who really am I? What is it that I want? What is it that I value? Do I value all these things because that's what I've grown up being told I should value, or do I value a lot of things because I really do believe in that and I want that? And sometimes the gap year in Israel, and in seminary, some people get to know themselves a lot more, and they really get in touch with themselves and who they are. Sometimes it's not a good experience in that way. Sometimes they're kind of like putting up with it and they're okay. They have friends, but like they're not feeling it, and they come back and they're like, okay, that wasn't really me. But now it's like, well, what is it that you, how do you want to identify, and what is it that you really want for yourself? And that can really take time. Like 18, 19 is a pretty young age to really know yourself, what you believe in, what you value, what kind of life you want to live, what kind of hashkafa you really identify with. Some young girls really know themselves well. They were just always very confident in who they were, their identity. They went to a great seminary that they really loved. They come back, they're ready to start their lives. They're ready, I shouldn't say start their lives. They're ready to embark on the next stage of their lives. Many are not.
So how would you know the difference? I'm asking as a mother, and I'm also thinking for the single woman maybe listening to this, both perspectives. How would you know?
So, I mean, it's really like a general feeling that the young girl might have. And I can tell a lot of times when I see them in my office, I can tell by talking to them. Like sometimes they're just like really sure of what they want, what they believe in, how they see their future, their goals and everything. Other times, really not. Other times I'll just hear like, well, this isn't really me, and I don't really identify with my family's values. I didn't really have a good time in seminary. I didn't really fit in high school, whatever. But, right now, all my friends are just kind of like, all they talk about is shidduchim and getting married and dating. So like, there's nothing else, so I would like to find a guy. If I found a guy that worked with me, then, I would like that. And I'm just like, but why is that the only option? Like,
right.
Like the world is your oyster. Like there's so many other things that can make you happy. And 18, 19, you're young. Like this is a great time to live your life, have fun, explore different things that the world has to offer, take courses, explore different career paths. And why should a young woman feel like she needs to be why should a young woman feel like she needs to be pressured into deciding, like to making that decision of how she wants to see her life, like forever, like for the rest of her life at 18? Why should she have to decide that at 18?
Right. I want to go back just a little bit because I mentioned mental health problems and we really didn't discuss them. There's a whole spectrum. There are young women who have undiagnosed problems. There are ones who have known problems. And it's a big issue with the shidduch, situation where there's a stigma of mental health. And I don't think the stigma is any stronger than it is in shidduchim. So there's a lot of questions there. The question is about revealing it. That's beyond the scope of this talk. And go to your Rav and work on that. But from the perspective of knowing you're ready in terms of ongoing known mental health or knowing when to get help and not being afraid that somehow that's going to harm your shidduchim. I want to just explore a little bit, let's say anxiety, depression, because I'm telling you as a pediatrician, if I go in the room of a young woman and she's not anxious and depressed, I'm happily surprised. It's really common.
Super common. Yeah. Super common. I hate to say it, but yeah, super common among young girls. in high school, super common among girls who were, seminary and post-seminary, a lot of anxiety going on. And what I see is a lot of untreated anxiety or even undiagnosed anxiety, because still this antiquated idea that if you go, that some parents have, that if we take our daughter, to a therapist or to a psychiatrist and she gets diagnosed with anxiety, then now she has that label, she has that stamp on her that she's got anxiety, she's got a diagnosis, and now all of a sudden she's in the mental health category, and that's going to hurt her shidduchim.
I think we should turn it on its head. I think if they're not in therapy, you should be skeptical.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
I mean, I'm joking a little bit, but not really, because someone who says, I go to therapy, I'm dealing with my anxiety, is dealing with their situation, and someone who's avoiding it is not.
Exactly. But, I agree. But it's still I feel like we're still so far behind in this.
Right.
And like recently, a young girl who I work with, she's divorced. She's still young, but she's divorced. And she's telling me about a guy that she was really seriously considering going out with in a different community, like a different city out of town. And he was also divorced. And I just said, okay, fine. But like, why did he get divorced? Like, what was his reason? And she said, well, apparently his ex-wife had really bad anxiety. And, I feel bad for him that he had to deal with that. And I was just like, I'm sorry, but you don't divorce a woman just because she has anxiety, like you work with it, you meet with a therapist, you see a professional, maybe you see a psychiatrist, you learn about it. But like to divorce, for a young couple to divorce because you find out that your spouse has anxiety, no. And if somebody tells you that, like, usually there's probably something else going on there.
Right. And that brings me to the idea of when everybody is going through the potential person to date, and they don't even get to the date because they're being ruled out because of XYZ imperfection. I mean, the idea that they have to be perfect. There is no perfect.
Right. And like I actually mentioned in another podcast, whether it's mental health or physical health or even just like something like a speech impediment or like a fine motor skill thing where you might need some OT. There's just so much stigma attached to all these things, right? And then what we end up seeing is that, like, okay, so we don't want to, get our kid, speech therapy because then it goes on their resume. We don't get an OT because that goes on their resume, right? But then what you end up having is like all these young people post-seminary, post-yeshiva or in yeshiva, whatever, and they have like this squeaky clean resume, but they have like untreated Crohn's, right? Or undiagnosed Crohn's.
Oh, that's a horrible story. Yeah, you told me that.
In pain all the time.
Horrible.
Yeah. So constantly. So instead, you marry a woman with, with severe digestive illness that she could have had treated, but didn't because of her resume. Or you have a guy who can't say, the letter R.
Right.
Because he didn't get speech therapy. So he's got a lisp, or he's got like a speech impediment and he's saying he can't say R, or he's got a lisp because he didn't get speech therapy. Well, I'd rather marry a guy who could speak properly and had some speech therapy when he was a little boy than have a squeaky clean resume, but then in real life has problems.
Right. I mean, and that's something you're going to figure out on the first meeting anyway. I mean, you can't hide these things. Some things you can.
Those things you can't, but I mean, seriously, when it comes to mental health, that is very often an invisible illness. And people do hide a lot of mental health issues during the shidduch process. And many Rebbeim will tell them not to say anything until after the wedding. Don't tell that you have depression. Don't tell that you struggled with depression or anxiety. Don't tell that you were one time on medication until after the wedding. Because they're afraid that, that they won't be able to get married. And then you reveal this after the wedding and your spouse is now faced with a whole new world, which is not fair to anybody. And it's not fair to the person who has been dealing with a mental illness, because why should they have to be ashamed of the fact they have depression or anxiety, and why should they be told to go into a marriage based on lies?
Right. And it goes back to being ready, being prepared for marriage, right? Being in a state where you're mentally, emotionally, physically ready. Also honesty, right? I mean, how do
There's
you
a
enter
lot,
a
yeah.
relationship without honesty?
There's a lot of dishonesty that goes on. a lot of lying, and it's become almost like an acceptable thing. And as somebody who I used to be very active in Shidduchim, I'm like, like as a shadchan, I set up many young couples. I've made a few successful ones.
Mazel tov.
Thank you. Many unsuccessful ones that didn't work out, but I'm saying like that didn't get married. But I would be like, I've been lied to my face by some people, like, people coming to me and lying about their age, lying about their state of health, mental health, physical health, family situations. They'll tell me like, oh no, like this, that, the other. And like, I'm 28, they're actually 33. And they just don't, because they don't want me to find, they don't tell me because they don't want me to find out and then reveal it to the person who I'm setting them up with. At which point I just say, like, if you're not going to be honest with me, like, why should I work with you? Because I don't want to be responsible for deceiving people. So.
Right, but I mean, how do you build a relationship when the very first thing is a lie, right? I mean, I remember I had someone who was a babysitter for me, and she got married. Unfortunately, she was an orphan. It was difficult. She was from another country, and she called me up right after marriage. He lied to me about his age, and she was devastated. You could see that all the trust was eroded from that one little piece of misinformation. So I think that
I call that, so when somebody lies about their background, personality, family, whatever, or when they try too hard to be something they're not, and they end up getting married and it works out, I say in quotation marks, I call that counterfeit chemistry.
Ooh. That's a perfect segue to trying to be something that you're not, because I think especially for a woman, there's this pressure to be the Adel Madel, the perfect, and they all seem like clones at the end, because there's a game, right? And there's a certain image and there's a certain resume, and then you have a whole bunch that are not distinguishable. But at the end of the day, you're not necessarily portraying yourself as who you are.
Right. Exactly. Right. Because, a lot of women, a lot of young women are told, well, men like this, guys like this, guys like it when you let them be right. Guys like thin girls, guys like, I don't know, when you wear this kind of makeup, and when you act like this on the date. And I've seen young girls who are dating for a little while and things aren't really picking up, and people tell them, well, you have to like act a little bit more like flirtatious and flip your hair around a little bit more and wear, and I'm just like, but why? That's not you. That's not how you're gonna act for the rest of your life. Like, no.
How are you going to get the person that's right for you if you're pretending to be somebody that you're not?
Yeah, not easily. I have to say, it was very funny. My husband and I, last year for my birthday, before COVID times, we were out at this really, really nice restaurant, and it was a little bit later in the evening, and this young from couple, clearly a shidduch date, walks in. Pretty sheepish looking, very cute, and they sit down. This couple, there was like no, nothing
Connection?
holding them back.
Connection.
Like I hope they got married. So these two were clearly science fiction freaks.
Oh!
Like, you couldn't tell by looking at them. They looked like the totally the average, like he's wearing like the black and white. He put the hat down. She's got like this cute little sneeze dress, and she looked like a typical Beis Yaakov. But they sat down. They were talking so loud because they were so excited about what they were talking about, and they're going on, they're bouncing back and forth about Star Trek and Doctor Who and all the characters of Doctor Who, and who do you think was hiding this and they're so excited.
I love it.
And I think like, oh my gosh, these two, this is like a match made in heaven. Like, they're not holding anything back. They're being completely open about who they are. They're not pretending anything here. Like,
they found each other.
Yeah, somebody did a really good job with these two, and my husband and I were laughing.
Oh, you
Love
should have
being,
taken their name and found out.
well, it's a little
Oh,
personal.
well. Oh, sorry. I wanted to know.
We
I hope.
just had a kick out of watching them. It was very cute.
I mean, I'm sure there's more to makes a good Shidduch other than, sharing interests. But the point, is a really good one about what if you're just trying to be something that you're not? And how are
Yeah.
you going to find the person who's right? So
There's,
if you,
honestly, there's so much of that going on, and it's not sustainable.
so the flip side is, how do you know what you want? What if you don't?
Then you need to take more time to figure it out. And there's so many ways to figure it out, but those ways are not really talked about or encouraged enough.
So what can you name some of those ways? I just want to make one point before I lose my moments as a mom. I just want to say to other moms out there, if your daughter's not ready, give her time, please.
Yeah.
Listen to what we're saying and give her time, because what you're going to say, I'm sure it takes time and effort. So go for it.
Yeah. So I think travel is a great way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, not so helpful now.
Not now, but I find, I mean, at least for myself, I found, like, as a single girl or as a divorced girl, travel, like, once you start traveling and just meeting, especially when you meet Jews from other places, it really opens up your eyes to, it makes you question your core beliefs. Not just about yourself, but just about the world and how people are, why people behave the way they do, how people are supposed to act or not supposed to act. Like, I grew up in Toronto. When I got to seminary, I went to a very typical classic, I won't say which one, but very typical classic girls seminary, one that's been around for a very long time, one that's still very popular. I got there and I was like one of the only Canadians. I never knew how loud New Yorkers were.
We're so
I was like, the volume, my gosh, like, this is so foreign to me. But, like, it took some time, like, to adjust to the volume. But then I got to know these girls. I'm like, wow, like, these are cool people. It was just like a different exposure. And then when you get to Israel, it's a whole other experience. And especially in Israel, when you meet people from, like, Jews from everywhere, South Africa, England, all over Europe, and everybody has a different story. Jews from Mexico, it's fascinating, and it opens up your eyes to the world, and then it makes you question your own life. Like, is this something I want to explore, or, like, is this something I value?
Right. Is this something I'm doing just because I was always, brought up to do it this way, but it's really not really necessarily part of Yiddishkeit the way it has to be. It's, just a cultural overlay kind of thing.
Yeah. And there are so many, there's just so many different kinds of Jewish communities and from communities all over the world. And I think even if, like, you go to Israel and you meet Jews from Mexico, even if you don't want to live in Mexico, it's just so fascinating to see how they grew up and what kind of community they live in. And it might make you grateful for some things that you grew up that you took for granted that you didn't realize, or it might make you sort of long for things that you were missing, certain things that you might have been missing. I think it changes a lot of stereotypes that we might have about people. Like, I can tell you, for example, I one time ended up at a meal in my 20s. I was like, this is like when I worked in Israel. I one time ended up at a meal by this American family. They're originally from Borough Park or something, Ger Hasidim, and they had now moved to Israel, and they were living in the heart of Geula, and, like, very, very nice people. And the father walked in, like, very tall guy, huge sputic on top of his head. They had like 10 married kids or something. I don't remember it. And the mother was still, like, I don't know, 50 or something like that. Very nice people. And so I'm like, okay, cool, this is an experience. And then the father says, I don't know, around the fish course, the father says, so last week I was in Hong Kong for Shabbos by the Chabad, at the Chabad of Hong Kong. And there was a group there from a Reform temple in Dallas. And the rabbi was a woman. And her husband got up to speak, and he introduced himself as the Rebbitzin. And I was like, what? He's like, I'm the rabbi's husband. Some people refer to me as the Rebbitzin. And I'm looking at this man in the middle, in the heart of Geula with like a Bekisha and a Spadek, and I was like, are you were okay with this? Like, were you like, you were comfortable with this, like Shabbos? And he's like, sure, why not? And his wife says, oh, my uncle, he likes everybody. He's good with everybody, everywhere, all the time. I was like, whoa, this is not what I expected, but okay.
That is so funny.
It was funny, but super educational. Something that you won't learn in school, right?
Right. And you know what? Also, the nice thing about travel is that you're not putting your life on hold. I mean, I think one of the problems that single women face is they're waiting for their MRS, right?
Right.
Their life is on hold because I won't have, my beautiful dishes until I have my married home. I won't go on trips until, I'm married. So I think that travel is one thing that you can do to learn about yourself and also to be living because it's your life now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So and even if you can't travel, I would say even just like exposure in a meaningful way. So like one thing that I used to do when I lived in Flatbush was that I used to go well, I worked in the city, but I used to work in Kiruv in the city, but I used to go every Wednesday night to Partners in Torah at East Manhattan, and it would be like a bunch of us, from mentors, men and women, and like totally secular people that were coming to learn with us. Students from NYU, business people, investment bankers. They just wanted to connect with their roots. And we would be studying with them, and you get a ton of exposure. And some of them, like, we actually created really meaningful relationships. And that's very enriching, in my opinion.
So meeting different kinds of people, travel, what else?
Reading, if that's your thing, taking courses, learning different skills. Like some of my single friends here in Toronto who, are like not that young anymore because they're my friends. They're involved in so many things. Like one is like, she's now a Krav Maga instructor. Some of them are really into their art, their karate. A bunch of them actually volunteer. Well, married women do this too, and I used to do it too before I had such a busy practice, but a bunch of them volunteer at the Baker Holm House, packing meals for people in the hospital and cooking and baking, and packing up food and meals, for families and people who are like, staying at the Baker Holm House near Mount Sinai and downtown. So those are also nice things. Getting involved with like big brother, big sister programs for like a child who, needs that connection. Maybe it comes from a single parent home, or whose parents are working, or it comes from a family with like a very large family, and they aren't getting some of the attention that they might need. So like volunteering to spend time, volunteering for High Lifeline for families who have, a member going through cancer treatment or in the hospital and they need help in their home. Tons of things.
To live your life, and you're growing and you're getting to where you need to be, but not waiting for your real life, because this is your real life.
Yes, and exactly. And what I really find is some of the best and most meaningful relationships that eventually turn into marriages are formed while you're living your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of really nice couples meet at High Lifeline while they're volunteering, or they meet through Beaker Cholim while they're delivering packages, or they meet on their travels, somewhere in Israel or in Italy, at the Chabad house, and you meet a nice guy from South Africa. Well, who knew, right?
Right. I'm going to go back to dating. I don't have a great segue for this, but I'm thinking of something and I don't want to forget to talk about it. Awkward segue, but we're moving on. You're on a date and your date tells you, okay, we're going to meet at Starbucks. And you get out of work and you get dressed and you take a train and a bus and whatever, and all you get is coffee. And you're thinking, this is what you're there to make a relationship, but all you got was coffee. You worked really, really hard, and that's where you ended up. Is there a way to be able to articulate your needs better? Because I think that it's not just about the coffee. It's about being able to articulate what you need and not just be so concerned about fulfilling someone else, being what they want you to be, for example.
So there's a lot to unpack here.
I know I gave you a lot. I'm sorry.
No, but it's there's so much underlying stuff to unpack.
Right.
So I feel like this has become a greater problem in the dating world.
Mm.
And this, because I feel like, especially like in the tri-state area, dating, the shidduch scene there's just so much, like that's like the epicenter of Jewish dating, right?
People come here just to date, yes.
Yeah, or move there, move there just to date. And whatever.
From Canada.
Yeah,
Right.
and I lived there for, I had a short time when I was like in Shidduchim in New York. Clearly it didn't serve me that well because I married someone from South Africa who grew up around the corner from me in Toronto. But
It's amazing.
Which is amazing.
Right.
Yes, but I'll tell you, like, I was starting to find like this is not good. Like, this is out of control. Like, I would have somebody set me up with a guy and he'd be like literally fitting me into his schedule, where he would be like, okay, so yeah, I know you're all the way in Brooklyn, but like I work in the middle of the city and I have to be home, by like 5:30 because I have a chavrusa and then I got to eat my dinner, So I'll meet you. Like, if you can just take this train and then walk 3 more blocks this way, I'll meet you for half an hour for a coffee, after I get out of the office, and then I got to rush home. And I'm just like, well, why don't we? No, I'm just like, no, no. Why don't we do this on a day when like you have more time, or you can actually come to Brooklyn? He'd be like, oh, I don't travel all the way to Brooklyn for dates. Like, I live on the Upper West Side. It's way too far for me. And I was like, whoa, okay, so this is where we're at. Like, this is where we're at. And I know that like so many girls and mothers are listening to this saying like, yeah, this is where we're at. And it's terrible. Yes, I know it is. And so many girls have complained to me like, yeah, like, I eat before the date because I go and like the guys don't really spend unless it's like at least the third date, then they'll buy you like maybe something to eat, like a salad or whatever. I feel like chivalry is dead. And it's a problem because in my opinion, if you're looking to invest in a future with somebody here, then you want to lead with your best foot forward, and fitting in someone into your day for a coffee just because you're trying them on for size is not how you lead with your best self. Sorry. It's not. And I saw a lot of that. And the fact that girls are, capitulating, is that the word for it? Like, just putting up with this and just,
right.
Yeah, this is
the norm. It's normal.
Yeah, that I feel like that's also sending a really bad message. That's like sending a message to women that like they should be codependent, because that's like saying you basically have to like put up with like the bare bones of having your needs met just to get a date, just to have a guy meet you for an hour. And you should be lucky because so many girls are not getting any dates.
Right. We're not even talking about what it's like just to try to get a date.
Right. Yeah. Like, you get a date
stand up above the fray of all the other resumes.
Yeah. So like, you're lucky that you got a date, and the date is literally like 1 hour, and the guy maybe buys you a coffee, and you should feel grateful because so many girls aren't getting dates. And it's just like, so then let's say you marry the guy. Well, you should be grateful that the guy this, and you should be good. And like, literally none of their needs are being met, but the message started out so much earlier on.
Right.
Well, that you should be grateful that you even got a date and that you're not left behind single. And then and so by the time I was on the round of dating that I met my husband, because I was married before it was not a good situation. It was a very unhealthy, I won't go into detail, but I was married to a very mentally unhealthy person, and for a short time, and no kids. And when I was on that round of dating, I basically didn't end up even dating anyone except for my husband, because I had gotten so good at weeding out the guys who I knew were just like jaded and just trying people on for size here and there. And it was just like speed dating without the speed, And I could literally tell on the phone call when the guy would be like, oh, meet me in Manhattan for an hour and maybe I'll buy you a coffee. I would just be like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. And then I always say, or my husband always says, it's because, you know, it's that I gave him a chance because, you know, because he was actually a gentleman. He always says, well, it's because I'm a South African, so that's why.
South Africans are awesome, I have to say.
Yeah, like I could have, I started dating my husband, and it was like as soon as we would sit down, he would automatically be pouring the water for me. And like, God forbid, like he shouldn't walk me home afterwards. Like he said, if I didn't walk you home, my grandfather would kill me.
Chivalry is not dead in South African men.
It's really not. It's a really big part of their values. Also in South Africa, you never ever let somebody walk home alone at night because
dangerous, right?
It's very dangerous. So like even when we were like further along in our courtship, we were in Israel. If we were out with like friends or like Friday night walking home from a meal and there was like a girl going home, my husband would be like, no, we have to walk her. We have to walk her back to her apartment because something could happen to her. I was like, okay, we'll take you. So that's the kind of guy he was. And that's really why I actually agreed to continue, because I could see like, this is a guy who takes his life seriously. This is a guy who's investing in his future. And he's not just like trying on women for size. He's actually like treating them like women, like people who deserve to be treated with respect and attention. They could be potential wives, a potential wife for him.
Right. I mean, respect, it's very, very basic. And that brings me to shadchanim. Again, another awkward segue. But the shadchan, one of the problems is if you're trying to weed out potential dates, and it may be even hard to get some, right, due to various the ways it's working out. The other pressure is to say yes to the shadchan because otherwise you're too picky.
Right.
So that's a separate topic to unpack a little bit for a minute. Because I think it's important for young women to be able to say no if they know ahead of time that this isn't going to work, or to be able to say no after the date when it doesn't work.
Yes, absolutely. So there's a few sides to this, because on one hand, I would say, like, as somebody who used to be a pretty active shadchan, there are girls who have missed the memo on what is important. So a lot of them are, or I wouldn't say a lot, many of them are picky because they're picking on things that are not going to, they're not going to define whether this is a good partner or not. Like, they've seen him, they don't like how he dresses. He's got a job, but the job doesn't make enough money yet. They want him to have a graduate degree. He only has a bachelor's. He's just not their type. They met the mom and she's not their type, or, you know, I don't know, something like that. And they won't even give the guy like a try, even though there actually could be potential. And then there are other times where, no, like they really know the guy, and they really know like this is not for them. And the shadchan is just trying to get people married off. Like, they're just trying to get people to have dates. They're just trying to they're trying to get things moving, and you know, and they also have to be respectful of people's feelings. But like, I think the times when I got frustrated is like, I can understand saying no for certain reasons, but it was like, I had some people come and say no to like literally every suggestion. And it was almost like, when you get that many no's, no, like after 20 suggestions, it was usually based on like a looks thing, which is very frustrating because they have in their mind, usually it could be a guy, it could be a girl. It's like they have in their mind like this image of what they want to marry, and they don't understand like that doesn't exist. You know, or I had a girl come to me and tell me about all these really bad experiences about guys that, like, you know, like cool guys, but like they treated her horribly and took advantage of her and hurt her feelings and broke her heart and et cetera, and this and that, the other. And I was like, okay, let's stay away from these kinds of guys. And like, let me say it was a really nice guy, and like, who I happen to know, really nice guy, and has very good values and good qualities. Everything that she had just complained about, I was trying to like fix, you know, get her somebody that was like the opposite. And she says no, because he's just like, she's not attracted to that type. And he wasn't a nerdy guy or anything. It's just, she still had in her mind this image of like this cool kind of bad boy type of guy that she was like really attracted to, and then she's getting treated
Bad
like
because
really
he's a bad
poorly.
boy.
Yeah, and she's getting treated really poorly by this cool guy, and then I suggest a really quality guy who's also, in my opinion, a cool guy, but she, yeah, not her type. And I'm just like, okay, well then, good luck. I don't know.
Right,
I
but
don't know
what
what to
about the
tell you.
young woman who really does know what she wants and what she's getting offered not what she wants, but then she's starting to feel like, well, okay, I can't keep saying no because they're just giving
So
her warm bodies. They're giving her somebody maybe she doesn't have the best shadchan, or
right.
you
So
know maybe they're just
I would, if
recommending the next
yeah,
person
so
they
if I
know.
were her, I would get very, I would try and practice when she's not speaking to shotgun. I try and practice, get very good at articulating what it is you want and why these guys are really not what you're looking for. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm not going to go out because, like I said before, this is what I'm looking for, and this guy is just not that, right? Like you told me he's this, and I told you I'm really not looking for that.
Right,
So
and that's
thank you.
important. Even if you date them, say you date them and you feel that way, and then you feel like, but I can't say it because I can't articulate it. Because I'm
I
sure that
mean,
happens.
yeah, and then you should, but then you should be able to articulate, like, I went out, I gave him a try, but like I said, I'm looking for this and he's this. I
Right,
go,
and
sorry. Like,
it boils down to knowing again what you want, being able to stand up for yourself, and not to let fear of this shidduch thing that we're not saying, the shidduch hysteria.
yeah.
Let's call it the shidduch hysteria, to not use the C word, um, to make you fearful that you have to accept something that your inner voice is telling you is wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Right.
So then my next question is, how do you know how much hishtadlus you need to do? Because you can say, okay, I'm telling the shadchan that I don't want these people, and then you're not getting dates. Then what?
Right. So I really think it's a very like delicate balance. I think there are some people who don't really know what they're looking for, like they have an idea in their heads or they don't know what they're looking for, or sometimes I'll even meet like parents, mothers who literally no guy is good enough for their daughter, or no girl is good enough for their daughter, no family is good enough for their daughter or son, whatever. And then sometimes actually the person that, the young girl or the young guy who's looking is actually kind of unique. And they do need a kind of a specific person, and this shadchan is not really doing it for them. And in that case, like, I think that's fine, but then you need to start sort of seeking out different kinds of connections, different kinds of shadchanim that kind of like understand you more, understand the language you're speaking, understand what you're looking for, understand your family background, and then maybe that can work for you better. And I've seen that, and sometimes it just takes a few tries before you find like the right person who can help you. And then sometimes it works out really nicely.
And what about the flip side? So someone who's dating a lot and they're
Mhm.
getting burnt out.
Right. So you can always take a break. You can always take a break, but you know what's funny? You know what really I find is funny is that sometimes I'll see young single people, or even not that young single people, they'll get burnt out and they'll take a break and they'll just get busy with other things, and they'll just like take a breather and say like, okay, fine, I'll be okay. Life has other things to offer. I just need to collect, my thoughts and my life together and take a vacation, whatever. And then like this really in the middle of this like shit vacation, this really amazing suggestion will come up, and they'll tell them like, well, nobody on a break, and then I don't know, but it sounds good, and somebody will like push them to go out, and then like that's the person they marry, right? Because sometimes when you're not looking, that's when you find it.
Right. So it's okay to take a break, but be open. Don't be too rigid.
Yeah. I mean, unless there really is something like, that something very specific that you need to work through.
Right, a
Like
specific
if you've
crisis in your life where you're just not able to deal.
Yeah, if you've had a loss, or struggling with an illness or a mental health issue, or just something, something drastic or difficult, like then you probably shouldn't really be pursuing a relationship at that time. But I also find that, I don't know. I also find, when I speak to people about taking a break, then they'll say like, oh, but it's depressing. And then I feel like I'll never be ready. And the break is going to make me depressed, or this healing time is going to take forever. And like, honestly, it doesn't. I'll just be like, sit with it for now, be present. And I promise you, you'll be better. You'll be refreshed soon. You'll be revived soon. And I promise you'll be ready to get back out there. You just need to take that breather.
You know what that reminds me of? When you talked to me another time about the way you present yourself. You were telling me a story about when you were in a better place and how you kind of projected a certain positivity as opposed to when you're exhausted and burnt out and depressed. So I'm wondering if maybe that's why you may find someone precisely when you're on your break.
I think so. I think that might be. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the story like when
I think it was a shopping story.
Oh,
with the dress.
My God, yeah. So
I'll put you back in that position.
Yeah, that used to happen all the time. This was post-divorce when I was on a break. I was on a year-long break, and I was not. But I really could not meet anyone. Like, I was still really in trauma recovery then, but
Right.
I was very, very happy. I was very happy in my life. I loved my job. I had amazing friends. I was living in Flatbush, so there was like such good restaurants and sushi and like shopping. And I was like, nobody knew I was divorced because I had uncovered my hair, but like, yeah, I got so many people inquiring, like, who are you? I have a nephew for you. He's the perfect boy for you. What are you, 22? And I'm like, no, I'm 27. Thank you. But it happened all the time. Like, yeah, people in the grocery store, shopkeepers, people at work, people at shul.
But you're projecting a sense of, I know who I am, and that's really a very attractive feature as opposed to I'm trying to be something for somebody else.
It's partly I know who I am, and then it's also partly like I don't care. It's also partly just like I'm happy, I'm enjoying life. Yeah, there's like I also like I have a good sense of humor, so I would just talk, make a joke or say something funny, and people would be like, "Oh my gosh, she's so funny! Like she's so sweet, she's so funny. Like why is she single?" I'm like, well, there's a reason. There's a reason. But thank you.
You know what? I could talk to you all day, but I'm going to try to wrap this up. But I want to say one thing also that I don't want to forget, because we did not talk about red flags of dating, and that is a whole separate topic. And I want to someday I'm going to do this someday. But in the meantime, I want to give a shout out to a different podcaster, Ricky Feldman, who has a podcast called Isha. And May 2020 episode, she talked with Avital Levin about the red flags of dating. So for anyone who wants to listen to that topic right now, you can go to the Isha, KOLISHA podcast, and look up the episode of the red flags of dating with Avital Levin, May 2020. So I didn't do that topic, but I just referred it out.
For sure. It's a big thing.
Yes. And I just want to end with a little bit of advice on things that a single woman can do to be at their healthiest during this time. In addition to, if they need therapy, get it, what else could they do? And I'll remind you what we talked about. It was going to be having a mentor and having good support systems, but I'll let you elaborate.
Yeah. So one of the things that I would say is really important. And so this is something that I studied. I'm all about attachment theory and the importance of healthy attachment. And so when I was, I trained in something called emotionally focused therapy, and it's mostly for couples. And so, the EFT movement, it's founded by a psychologist named Dr. Sue Johnson, and she basically created this from attachment theory, and the originator of attachment theory is Dr. John Bowlby. And he basically just talks about how it's just totally normal human nature that when a baby is born, they reach out needing to attach to other people. And this is just human nature. And so what I find is that in this period of time between coming out of like high school, seminary vibe, time in your life, where you're like surrounded by people and peers and teachers and reps, and then before women get married, and that could be a short time or it could be a very long time, instead of having this idea of like a waiting room, where I don't really think creates healthy attachment, because it's like you might hang out with friends, but if your interactions with friends are really just about like talking about the next date you're going on, or what guys you went out with, and like it almost becomes like a competition thing, or like a fear thing, like who's going to get married first, and then how am I going to feel? Am I going to feel abandoned, lonely, whatever? What Dr. Sue Johnson says is that if you're not in a relationship and you're not a married person, and you might be working towards it, you might not be working towards it, you might choose to be single, it's still very important to surround yourself with healthy attachments and a healthy support system. And that goes totally the same for our community, is that if you are a single girl, or if you have a single daughter and she's in that no man's land, like that waiting period where it shouldn't be no man's land, it should be still a very enriching part of her life, she should have a proper support system, other than just doing the obligatory single girl events, a share here, a Shabbaton there, where everybody's just talking about marriage and dating and getting married and like a competition thing. No, like it should actually be like healthy relationships, healthy attachments, and healthy connections on things other than just grooming yourself to be a wife, because it's so important for human development and for emotional health and well-being. And if you don't have that, I mean, that can lead to anxiety, that can lead to depression. And so that's why I say, like we talked about before, things that can enrich your life. If you don't get married in the time where you think you should, or you're trying to continue to enrich your life, because that will also help you to form secure and healthy and meaningful connections with other people, which it's not just a bonus or a privilege, it actually is a human need.
Right. No, absolutely. You said that so beautifully. And also having a mentor, because I don't think you can expect your friends to be your mentor.
No, it's really important to have a healthy mentor, but make sure it's a healthy mentor, because there's a lot of unhealthy mentors out there. Make sure it's somebody who really knows you and knows what's healthy for you, and it's just saying like, oh, just go out. Like, it's normal to not feel connected or attracted to somebody, that you're dating or thinking of marrying. That attraction will come after the wedding, No, don't, if that's what your mentor is saying, find yourself a new mentor. It has to be a mentor that knows you, that understands relationships, understands attraction, understands the stage of life, somebody that's truly supportive and wants the best for you.
Absolutely.
Not just trying to make lots of marriages.
Absolutely. So I have to thank you so, so much for doing this with me. This has been so informative and so helpful, and I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.